What up, Chuds? Cobson here, back at it again with another brand new video. Today, we are going to talk about the top 5 most corrupt United States senators. I would like to note that Congress is a highly opaque and shady institution. As a result, this is only the top 5 most corrupt senators that we know of. The only rules are that they have been in the Senate for at least one full term, and that they have served sometime in the last 4 years. Some people who did not make the list might actually be far worse than those who are on it, but because many of their schemes and dealings are secrets, I can't prove anything against them. Starting with number 5, we have former Senator Diane Feinstein. Feinstein began her political career as the progressive mayor of San Francisco, and was first elected to the Senate in the 1992 special election to fill the seat once held by then-Governor Pete Wilson. In order to prove that someone is corrupt, we need multiple data points. The first point I would like to bring up is the fact that Diane Feinstein had a staffer working for her who was actually a Chinese spy. Feinstein allegedly did not know that this person was a Chinese spy, and fired him when she learned that he had connections to Chinese intelligence in the Bay Area. While this doesn't mean all that much, I think that we can use this data point to show that Feinstein's office is not very good at vetting potential staffers, especially since this Chinese spy literally went to functions in Feinstein's stead at the local Chinese consulate. We can see Feinstein's lack of judgment when it comes to who she associates with again in the 2011 story, in which her campaign's treasurer drained millions of dollars worth of donations. The fact that she did not learn from this incident and proceeded to hire a Chinese spy later, as mentioned, is honestly incredible. Finally, we have her role in the 2020 congressional insider trading scandal. Except it goes far further than that. According to Politico, in 2009, Senator Diane Feinstein and her husband, Richard Blum, bought over $1 million worth of stock in a company called Amyris Biotechnologies. What's important about this is the fact that Amyris was given a grant of $24 million only a few weeks later. Feinstein claimed ignorance and was cleared of all wrongdoing as nothing could directly be proven, despite how fortunate of a coincidence this turned out to be. Something else that should be noted is that her husband bought $250,000 worth in Facebook stock. When Mark Zuckerberg appeared at a committee hearing shortly after, Feinstein praised him and threw softball questions at the Facebook CEO. As a result, Facebook stock rose somewhat significantly. But if that wasn't enough, in 2020, Feinstein's husband sold $6 million worth of stock in Allogene Therapeutics, a company that was being investigated by the CDC during the height of the pandemic. Shortly after the stocks were sold, Allogene's stocks fell drastically. Now, this isn't personal to Diane Feinstein or any senator. My goal here is not to shame anyone, but to ask you, the viewer, is this the kind of conduct we want our elected officials to engage in? But just you wait, it only gets worse from here. So follow me into the void as we continue to number 4. That's right, it's none other than Lindsey Graham, the senior senator from South Carolina and a longtime war hawk. Let's start with the obvious. Graham is easily among the most hawkish members of Congress. It's no secret that defense contractors, who get a combined $300 to $500 billion a year, are some of his biggest supporters. Going over his record, Graham will support anything related to American arms production and the military-industrial complex. So let's fire off a lightning round real quick, because Graham's support for American intervention is beyond insane. For starters, Graham was amongst the strongest supporters of the Iraq War, and he continues to stand by his vote to authorize it to this day. Secondly, he has advocated for the United States to reinvade Afghanistan after U.S. troops left the country earlier on in the Biden administration. Biden has also pushed strongly for sending U.S.-made weapons to Ukraine in massive numbers. He has even endorsed attacking Iranian oil fields and remains open to a potential invasion of Iran. If that wasn't enough, he also wants to invade Venezuela. And on top of that, Graham has signaled his support for more aggressive action to be taken against Myanmar. You know what? Here's a map of everywhere that Lindsey Graham wants to put American boots on the ground. So I want to ask my viewers again, does Lindsey Graham represent you? Should someone who wants to invade any country that is slightly inconvenient to the neoliberal world order be the kind of person who should be making policy decisions on behalf of any state whatsoever? I don't think so. Now, no list of the most corrupt members of the Senate could be complete without the man, the myth, the turtle, Mitch McConnell. A highly pragmatic and institutionally focused senator, Mitch McConnell has been the leader of the Senate Republicans since 2007, but before then, very few really knew Mitch all that much. The turtle is a man without any convictions besides a desire for power, and he will only be a team player when it benefits him personally. He presided over the 2008 Senate elections, in which the Democrats gained a supermajority in the Senate. Since then, McConnell would pick and choose who gets funding from the Senate Republicans and who doesn't. In 2010, Ken Buck wasn't given the proper funds necessary for his race, as most of his cash was thrown over to Linda McMahon and Carly Fiorina. In 2012, McConnell diverted funds away from Todd Aiken, Danny Rayburg, Rick Berg, George Allen, Tommy Thompson, Josh Mandel, and Heather Wilson, and instead funneled the cash into the campaigns of Jeff Flake and Linda McMahon. I could go on and on through 2022, and even the campaign so far in 2024, but I think you get the message. What I really want to talk about, though, is the judicial stuff. As someone on the right, I personally strongly approve of Neil Gorsuch, and I think Kavanaugh and Barrett are so-so. But where did these people come from? During the first Trump administration, it was the Heritage Foundation that essentially did all the procedures and duties of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I don't need to tell you how this worked. I want you to imagine if a group of eggheads who were primarily focused on fiscal conservatism, tax cuts, and balancing budgets got to decide who our judges were. That was literally the Senate's judicial confirmations, and no, I'm not even kidding. As bad as Feinstein's magically favorable financial transactions and Graham's warmongering, we've got the Heritage the Heritage Foundation messing with our judicial system. So I want to ask you, what's worse than throwing a bunch of ideological judges into random places? How about changing election law so you can hold on to power? Now, before I mention number 2, I want to pose a little hypothetical. Let's say you're a mediocre state legislator and your daddy just so happens to have won a gubernatorial election while being an incumbent senator. And then daddy decides to give you his old Senate seat while he becomes governor. And then you proceed to be one of the most divisive members of the Senate, someone who uses these divisions to win squeaker after squeaker while having an approval rating in the red. If that describes you, then you might just be the senior senator from Alaska, Lisa Murkowski. Starting with one of her most defining issues, energy policy and climate change, Lisa Murkowski has shown a contradictory record on what exactly to do on the topic. She knows that getting rid of the Alaska oil industry would crash the local economy, but she also wants to appear holier than thou on the environment. Her solution? All talk, no walk. Despite a prominent seat on the Climate Change Solutions Caucus, Senator Murkowski has overseen one of the biggest examples of backroom pork barrel spending in her state since the whole Ted Stevens corruption fiasco. Since Murkowski agreed to vote for Biden's nominees and Biden's legislative proposals whenever possible, her state was handed a massive project that is projected to produce 180,000 barrels of oil a day over a 68,000 acre sprawl within the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska. In exchange for a near guaranteed extra vote in the Senate, Biden essentially told his voters who voted for him because of the environment to go fuck themselves. And none of this would have happened if Lisa Murkowski had a shred of integrity. If that isn't enough, the project, named Willow, was handed to ConocoPhillips, Murkowski's single largest backer in direct money contribution during the highly contentious 2022 election. So in exchange for helping her keep her job, Murkowski kicked back something huge to the people who bought her. Murkowski used taxpayer money to let the people who put her into office build a highly profitable set of oil rigs in Alaska and sold out her constituents who didn't want Biden's legislation to pass in the process, all the while pissing on the faces of the people who fell for her climate change shtick in unison with Joe Biden. But what if I told you that this isn't everything? During her 2022 campaign, 3 different out-of-state billionaire hedge fund managers from the lower 48 contributed $3 million in total to a super PAC called Alaskans for Lisa, a PAC directly dedicated to getting her reelected. Alongside this was another $300,000 in total spending by oil tycoons Michael Smith and Jeffrey Hildebrand. Besides ConocoPhillips, Lisa Murkowski received large amounts of funding from KKR & Company, a private equity firm known for giving out a giant payday to its founders without them even working, being forced to pay $40 million to settle a lawsuit handed to them by the SEC, and for pioneering the unethical practices that are rampant today in the financial world, courtesy of private equity firms. Combining the money from the 3 aforementioned billionaires, the additional cash from the oil tycoons, a few $100,000 from the Murdoch family of Fox News fame, the cash of ConocoPhillips and KKR & Company, we can say that the amount of money she's gotten from these entities totals at least $4 million, at least, and potentially as high as $5.5 million, which is about half of the amount of money she spent during her competitive 2022 re-election campaign. Now for the big one, the election law changes. This was quite a paper trail, but I think I found something. In 2020, Alaska Measure 2 was narrowly passed with 50.5% of the vote. Cash supporting Alaska Measure 2 absolutely dwarfed the amount of spending done by individuals and groups against the measure. The majority of this spending was done by a group called Alaskans for Better Elections, which itself is actually a subsidiary and was created and largely held up by the Denver-based PAC called Unite America, which is led by left-wing activists Evan McMullin, David Johnson, Greg Orman, and none other than former governor of Alaska, Bill Walker, who, during his tenure, was very close to Lisa Murkowski. Unite America just so happened to have endorsed both Murkowski and Bill Walker for their respective senatorial and gubernatorial races of Alaska in 2022. So, to recap, a left-wing dark money group literally bought a favorable election result so they could change the rules to make them more favorable to their preferred candidate, who they knew would have handily lost a real Republican primary. Instead of, actually letting Republicans choose who they want, Alaska has a, quote, top 4 ranked choice voting regime for all down-ballot races following a blanket primary. The system was heavily criticized for being unwieldy and difficult to use, resulting in most voters only voting for 1 or 2 candidates. This had the expected result. Low information Republicans, alongside the entire Alaska Democratic Party and a few independents, outvoted more conservative independents and the Republicans who actually did their research. And this all happened as a result of ranked choice voting tabulation. And this, the reliance on out-of-state fundraisers and PACs allowing her to win off of a technicality in 2022, alongside the rest of her record and her dubious associates, make Lisa Murkowski the number 2 most corrupt United States Senator. Now, before we go on to number 1, I would like to list off a few honorable mentions because they were either too redundant, not particularly relevant, or they just didn't have enough of a paper trail to really be able to find something on them. Starting off with the honorable mentions is Senator John Hoeven of North Dakota, as well as former Senators Richard Burr and Kelly Loeffler of North Carolina and Georgia, respectively. These 3, alongside Diane Feinstein, were the biggest culprits behind the 2020 insider trading scandal. As a result, I thought I'd go out and mention these names since they are quite relevant. Our last honorable mention is Pete Ricketts, who was appointed to the Senate as a way to cash in his favors he had with Governor of Nebraska Jim Pillen. This is notable because Ricketts would have likely lost a primary against a more conservative option in a 2024 special election if Ricketts did not have the incumbency advantage. And now, for the moment you've all been waiting for. The number one most corrupt United States Senator is Bob Menendez. Do I really need to say anything about this guy? I mean, really. I don't have anything unique to say, so I'm just going to retell the funniest story. For those who don't know the juicy deets, I'll just say this. They found $500,000 sewn into Menendez's windbreaker that were given to him directly by the Egyptian government. Yes, this has all been verified in court. At least Feinstein's scandals could be chalked up to her not knowing how to vet a teammate. Lindsey Graham might actually believe the things he says, and McConnell just gets someone else to do the dirty work for him. And, Murkowski at least had the decency to hide her corruption and make her look somewhat respectable. Bob Menendez does none of these things. The man just flat out ignores the law and takes the cash, and for the longest time, no one really cared. If you want to know the absolute worst that Washington has to offer, I present to you Bob Menendez. Hey, if you made it this far in the video, please give me a like, a comment telling me how I did, and maybe even a subscription. I did a lot of research putting the pieces together, and I think this video turned out quite well. Feel free to share this with someone who might be interested in politics or government corruption, and please take a look at my other content. My goal with this is to inform, but if I happen to make a living off of it too, I won't mind. Cobson, out.